Nobody wants to hear this. That is the whole point. The things that are most true about human nature are also the things that make the most people the most uncomfortable, and so they get buried under better-sounding stories, under motivational speeches, under the language of progress and cooperation, and the idea that deep down everyone is fundamentally good. And those better-sounding stories feel so much nicer to carry around than the alternative. They are lighter. They do not keep you up at night. They do not make you look at the person sitting across from you at dinner and wonder what they would do if the rules disappeared and nothing was holding them back. But here is the thing about comfortable stories. They do not protect you. Understanding does. And a man who lived in one of the most violent and unstable centuries in European history, who watched a king get beheaded, who spent over a decade in exile, who built his entire philosophy on the ruins of everything that was supposed to hold society together, that man wrote down 8 things about human nature that nobody wanted to hear in 1651, and that almost nobody wants to hear today. His name was Thomas Hobbes, and what he found is going to change the way you see every person you have ever trusted, every system you have ever believed in, and every version of yourself you have ever tried to become. Hobbes was born in April of 1588 in Malmesbury, England. His birth itself was shaped by fear. His mother went into premature labor, reportedly after hearing news of the approaching Spanish Armada. He often joked that fear and he were twins. That joke contained his entire worldview, because Hobbes spent his life not running from fear but studying it, cataloging it, treating it as the most honest data point available about what human beings actually are beneath the layer of socialization we wear like a costume. The English Civil War, which began in 1642 and killed roughly 200,000 people in a country with a population of barely 5 million, was not a background event in Hobbes's life. It was the laboratory. He watched the King of England get executed by his own subjects in 1649. He watched institutions collapse. He watched people who were supposed to protect each other choose power instead. And from all of that, he drew conclusions. 8 of them matter more than the rest. Here they are, one by one, exactly as brutal as they need to be. The first brutal truth Hobbes discovered is that human beings are not naturally good. They are naturally strategic. Every culture in the world teaches children that the default mode of the human heart is generosity, kindness, cooperation. Hobbes looked at the evidence and came to the opposite conclusion. Without external constraint, without law, without a power that punishes defection, people do not spontaneously organize into communities of mutual aid and warmth. They compete, they hoard, they preemptively attack. The research of psychologists Delroy Paulus and Kevin Williams, who coined the concept of the dark triad in 2002, identifies a cluster of traits found across all human populations: narcissism, Machiavellianism, and psychopathy. These are not disorders. These are tendencies. They exist on a spectrum, and every human being carries some amount of each. A meta-analysis published in Personality and Social Psychology Bulletin found that people with elevated dark triad scores are overwhelmingly driven by personal power and stimulation rather than cooperation or altruism. Hobbes was not describing monsters. He was describing what lives inside the average person when the social incentives for behaving well are removed. This is uncomfortable precisely because it applies to you, too. Not because you are bad, but because you are human, which is not the same thing as being good. The second brutal truth is that everyone is equal in their capacity to destroy you. This sounds alarming. It is meant to. Hobbes made one of his most counterintuitive arguments in Chapter 13 of Leviathan when he asserted that all human beings are roughly equal by nature. He did not mean equal in wealth or status or intelligence. He meant equal in their ability to cause harm. Even the weakest person, he pointed out, can kill the strongest through cunning, deception, surprise, or alliance. No one is invulnerable. No one is safe from everyone. And from that equality of destructive potential flows an equality of anxiety. Everyone is a potential threat to everyone else, which means trust becomes rational only under very specific and carefully enforced conditions. You have felt this. You have met people who seemed harmless until they weren't. You have trusted structures that seemed solid until they collapsed. Hobbes was not being paranoid. He was being precise. The person who understands that no one is categorically harmless is the person who does not get blindsided when the harmless-seeming ones finally show what they are capable of. The third brutal truth is that competition, diffidence, and glory are the three engines of human conflict, and they never turn off. Hobbes identified these three principal causes of quarrel as embedded not in circumstance, but in human nature itself. Competition drives people to fight over scarce resources, and resources are always in some way scarce. Diffidence, which is closer to what we would now call preemptive self-defense, drives people to attack before they can be attacked. And glory, the desire to be recognized, respected, to be seen as someone who matters, drives people into conflicts that have nothing to do with survival and everything to do with the need to feel dominant. These three engines do not stop running in a modern city or a modern office or a modern relationship. They are just disguised. The competition that used to be about food and shelter is now about salaries and status. The preemptive attack that used to be physical is now reputational. And the hunger for glory has found an entire digital ecosystem perfectly designed to feed it. Hobbes was describing 1651. He was also describing 2026, and he would have been disturbed by how little has changed. If you're watching this video and you recognize yourself in any of what has been said so far, leave that recognition in the comments. Write down the number of the truth that hit you hardest, or write this if it describes what you have been seeing around you for years. I finally understand why the world works the way it does, and I am not sure I can unsee it. Comment that. Because there are people watching this right now who have been trying to name this feeling for a long time, and seeing it written by someone else is the thing that makes them feel slightly less alone in the recognition. Commenting here is a quiet act of solidarity with every person who has been told they are too cynical or too dark for seeing what Hobbes spent his life proving was simply true. The fourth brutal truth is that without enforcement, agreements mean nothing. Hobbes captured this in one of his most quoted lines: "Covenants without the sword are but words." This is not pessimism. It is a description of how social agreements actually function. People keep promises when keeping promises is enforced, or when breaking them carries a cost that outweighs the benefit of defection. Remove the sword, remove the consequence, and the promise becomes simply a statement of preference which changes with the circumstances. You have lived this. Every professional relationship that held while audits were running and dissolved when they stopped. Every personal commitment that lasted until it became inconvenient. Every institution that operated with integrity while external accountability existed and quietly corroded when it disappeared. The legal system, professional licensing, contracts, workplace regulations, these are not civilizational achievements built on the bedrock of human virtue. They are the sword. They are the enforcing mechanism that Hobbes told you was the only thing keeping the promise real. When someone tells you they will always be there for you with no structure, no accountability, no consequence for walking away, Hobbes has already told you exactly how much that promise is worth. The fifth brutal truth is that the desire for power does not have an end state. Hobbes wrote that he put for a general inclination of all mankind a perpetual and restless desire of power after power, that ceaseth only in death. That is one of the most unsettling sentences in the history of philosophy, and it has been confirmed by every version of research into human motivation that has followed. Power does not satisfy. It escalates, The executive who reaches the position they spent a decade pursuing discovers immediately that there is a higher position they now want. The person who built the network they dreamed of now wants a larger one. The one who accumulated the resources they once thought would be enough now finds the goalposts have quietly moved. This is not a flaw in those individuals. It is a feature of the species. Hobbes understood that this endless escalation was not born from greed but from fear. The fear that the power you have is not yet sufficient to protect you from everyone who also wants power. And so you reach for more. And so does everyone around you. And so the competition never resolves. The sixth brutal truth is that morality is a product of power, not a source of it. This one is the most disturbing for most people, and it is the one that Hobbes paid the highest price for in his lifetime, being accused of atheism and materialism and every available form of heresy. What Hobbes argued is that in the state of nature, there is no good and no evil in any objective sense. There is only what is desired and what is feared. Justice, fairness, morality. These concepts become real and enforceable only after a sovereign power exists to define and enforce them. Before the sovereign, everything is permitted because everything is necessary for survival. This does not mean that morality is fake. It means that morality is downstream of power. The group in power defines the rules. The group that defines the rules defines what counts as good behavior. And what counts as good behavior tends, with remarkable consistency across history, to be whatever is convenient for the group in power. You see this happening in real time in every institution you belong to. The rules that apply to everyone except the people who make the rules. The definitions of acceptable behavior that conveniently exclude the behavior of those at the top. Hobbes was not saying this to endorse it. He was saying it so you could see it clearly and stop being surprised by it. The seventh brutal truth is that safety is the only honest foundation for loyalty. People do not stay with leaders, institutions, partners, or communities out of virtue. They stay because the arrangement protects them. The moment the arrangement stops protecting them, they leave, and they are right to. Hobbes built this insight into the structure of his social contract. Individuals surrender freedom in exchange for security, and the only thing that justifies continued obedience is continued protection. This is not a cynical observation about human failure. It is an accurate description of how durable relationships actually work. The employer who takes care of their people builds loyalty that survives difficulty. The one who extracts and discards discovers that loyalty was always conditional on the exchange being fair. The government that provides genuine security earns compliance. The one that manufactures threats to justify its own power and then fails to actually protect anyone eventually loses the contract. Think about every long-term relationship in your life, personal or professional, and ask yourself what it is actually built on. The honest answer is almost never virtue alone. It is usually a combination of genuine care and genuine protection, which is exactly what Hobbes said it would be, and which is not a diminishment of those relationships, but a more honest account of why they have lasted. The eighth brutal truth, and the one that Hobbes saved for the deepest layer of his argument, is that the fear of death is the most powerful force in human psychology, and everything else is built on top of it. Not the love of life, the fear of its ending. Hobbes did not view this as a weakness. He viewed it as the most useful fact about the human animal. The fear of violent death is what makes cooperation rational. It is what makes the social contract worth signing. It is what makes the Leviathan necessary. Because rational human beings, confronted with the alternative, with a life that is solitary, poor, nasty, brutish, and short, will accept almost any arrangement that reliably removes that terror from their daily experience. This is why governments work when they do. This is why authoritarian governments work even better in the short term. because they are very good at making the fear of the state larger than the fear of anything outside it. And a population that fears the state more than it fears anything else is a population that complies. And this is why, when you understand what you are actually afraid of, you gain access to a kind of clarity about your own decisions that most people never reach. The things you have accepted, the arrangements you have tolerated, the compromises you have made. How many of them were driven not by what you wanted, but by what you were trying not to lose? If you are the kind of person who can sit with these 8 truths and not immediately reach for a more comfortable story, then this channel was made for you. What we do here is exactly this. We take the things that are true about human nature and power and fear, and we bring them out into the open, where they can be examined and understood rather than felt blindly from the inside. Every video goes deeper. Every video uses real data, documented history, and philosophical frameworks that have survived centuries because they describe something unchanging about what human beings are. If you are not subscribed yet, subscribe now. Turn on the notification bell. This is the space for people who would rather understand the world clearly than feel comfortable inside a story that does not hold up when the pressure gets real. Hobbes died in 1679 at the age of 91, having outlived almost everyone who had attacked him, which, given what he believed about human nature, was probably not a coincidence. The 8 truths he wrote down were not popular in his lifetime. They are not popular now. But popularity has never been the measure of accuracy, and what Hobbes gave you is not popularity. It is a map of how people actually behave when the incentives align with their nature rather than against it, a map of what holds relationships and institutions together and what causes them to fall apart, a map of why you have been hurt in the ways you have been hurt, and why the people who hurt you were not necessarily monsters but simply human beings operating according to mechanisms that Hobbes described 4 centuries ago with precision that has never been surpassed. You cannot unsee this, and you should not want to, because clarity, even brutal clarity, is always more useful than comfort, especially in a world that has no particular interest in protecting you from itself. Let us return to each of these truths and go one layer deeper, because understanding them at the surface is not the same as understanding them in your bones. And it is the bone-level understanding that actually changes how you move through the world. When Hobbes said human beings are naturally strategic rather than naturally good, he was not making a simple claim about selfishness. He was making a claim about the structure of motivation. Modern evolutionary psychology has largely vindicated him. Research into what scientists call costly signaling theory shows that much of what appears to be altruistic behavior in humans is actually reputation management. We help others when helping others makes us look good to the people watching. We cooperate when cooperation benefits us in ways that can be calculated even unconsciously. This does not make kindness fake. It makes it conditional in ways that most people are not honest about. And the person who understands the conditions is the person who is not destroyed when those conditions change and the kindness disappears. Think about the last time someone was genuinely helpful to you. Now think about whether they would have been equally helpful if no one would ever know they had done it. The honest answer to that question tells you something real about the nature of that relationship. When Hobbes said, "Equality of capacity creates equality of fear," he was describing something that modern security researchers have documented extensively in contexts ranging from international relations to cybersecurity. The strategic logic of preemptive action, of moving against a potential threat before it can materialize, is not a pathology. It is a rational response to genuine uncertainty. 2 researchers at MIT studying deterrence theory in the 21st century found that the logic Hobbes described in 1651 remains the foundational operating principle of nuclear deterrence today. The balance of terror works precisely because both sides know the other can destroy them, and that mutual knowledge of mutual vulnerability produces a fragile but functional peace. The same dynamic operates at every scale, between nations, between corporations, between individuals in a competitive environment. Understanding this is not paranoia. It is the ability to read the actual game being played rather than the game you were told was being played. When Hobbes identified glory, the need to be seen as someone who matters, as one of the three principal engines of human conflict, he was describing what modern social psychology calls social status motivation. And research published as recently as 2024 confirms that status-seeking behavior is one of the most consistent and cross-culturally universal features of human psychology. The desire to be respected, to be acknowledged, to have one's existence confirmed by the recognition of others. This drives more human behavior, more decisions, more conflicts, and more destruction than any other single motivation except the fear of death. You have seen it. The argument that had nothing to do with the facts and everything to do with who would be seen as right. The professional conflict that was never about the project and always about who would get the credit. The relationship that ended not because of incompatibility, but because one person's need to be dominant made genuine equality impossible. Hobbes was not describing a flaw in civilization. He was describing the animal that civilization is built on top of, still running the same ancient calculations, now wearing a suit. The enforcement truth, the fourth one, deserves more time than most people give it because its implications reach into every corner of daily life. The research on institutional corruption consistently shows that ethical behavior in organizations degrades in direct proportion to the reduction of external oversight. A landmark 2023 study examining corporate governance across 47 countries found that companies with weak external audit mechanisms showed corruption rates 3 to 4 times higher than those with strong enforcement structures, regardless of the stated values of the organization. The stated values did not change. The culture documents did not change. The mission statements did not change. What changed was whether anyone was checking. Hobbes would not have been surprised by this at all. He would have found it entirely predictable. Covenants without the sword are but words. The sword is the audit. The sword is the consequence. Without it, the words are just words, which is all they were ever going to be. The power escalation truth, the fifth one, connects directly to what neuroscientists studying reward pathways have documented about the nature of ambition. The brain's dopaminergic reward system, the system that generates the feeling of satisfaction when a goal is achieved, habituates rapidly to achieved outcomes. The salary you spent 3 years working toward produces a dopamine response for approximately 2 to 4 weeks before your brain resets its baseline and the new number becomes the new normal against which inadequacy is measured. This is not a moral failing. It is how the system works. And what it means, as Hobbes understood without any knowledge of neuroscience, is that the desire for more is structurally permanent. It does not resolve, it relocates. The person who understands this about themselves can stop being surprised when achieving their goals does not produce the lasting satisfaction they expected. And the person who understands it about others can stop being surprised when people who have everything still behave as though they have nothing, still grasp, still compete, still reach for one more unit of the power that will finally be enough, and never is. The morality as downstream of power truth, the sixth one, is the one that most people find hardest to sit with because it seems to invalidate the things they have spent their lives believing in. But Hobbes was not saying that kindness is an illusion or that justice does not matter. He was saying that justice, as a social reality rather than a personal aspiration, is enforced by whoever has the power to enforce it. And history does not offer a single, clean counterexample to this. Every major moral advance in human civilization, the abolition of slavery, the extension of voting rights, the recognition of basic dignities across lines of race and gender and class, came not from a spontaneous change of heart in the powerful, but from a change in the distribution of power that made the old arrangement no longer sustainable. the powerful did not become better people. The conditions changed. Hobbes would have found this sad but entirely predictable, and knowing this does not make you cynical. It makes you honest about where the leverage for real change actually lives. The loyalty as protection truth, the seventh one, should reframe every relationship you are currently in. Not to make those relationships feel smaller or more transactional, but to make them more honest. The research on organizational loyalty is consistent. People are loyal to institutions that make them feel genuinely protected and valued. When that protection disappears, loyalty follows. A study published in the Journal of Applied Psychology found that perceived organizational support, the degree to which employees feel the organization cares about their well-being, is the single strongest predictor of employee loyalty and discretionary effort, stronger than compensation, stronger than stated mission, stronger than relationship with direct management. This is Hobbes translated into human resources data. The arrangement holds when both sides are genuinely getting what was promised. It dissolves when one side stops delivering. This is not cynicism. This is the honest account of what durable commitment is actually made of. And the final truth, the fear of death as the foundation of everything, deserves one more moment of attention because it is the one that is most personally actionable. What Hobbes understood, and what every school of practical philosophy from Stoicism to existentialism has since built on in different ways, is that the awareness of mortality is not simply a source of terror. It is also a source of clarity. People who have had near-death experiences, who have faced serious illness, who have lived through genuine danger, consistently report afterward that the experience stripped away the things that did not matter and left visible only the things that did. The fear of death, properly understood rather than simply endured, is the most honest compass available to a human being. It points, with uncomfortable precision, at what you actually value when everything comfortable and distracting is removed. Hobbes believed the social contract was built on this compass. You can use it the same way, not to organize a society, but to organize a life. What are you actually afraid of losing? What does that fear tell you about what matters? Start from that answer, and the decisions get clearer. Not easier. Clearer. And in a world built on the 8 truths Hobbes discovered, clarity is the closest thing to safety that exists.